When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Comics YouTube channel. Today's video might be a controversial video, not sure. I'm assuming a lot of the people, especially on my channel, are going to agree with me on this opinion. But we're going to be talking about why is House of the Dragon beating Rings of Power, and kind of comparing the two shows, what each one has done right and wrong. And why I think Rings of Power is kind of slightly falling behind in the kind of race. They're two vastly different, like, actual medias when you really think about it, but they're kind of grouped into the fantasy element, and one is clearly beating the other. So before we get into the video, if you guys do want to subscribe, I do weekly breakdowns of both of the episodes for both shows. I've been doing streams for the Rings of Power. Those ones a little bit more casual, as I don't know as much about Lord of the Rings as I do like A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones or the House of the Dragon universe. But I do really enjoy doing those live streams and just kind of goofing around with some of my friends. But also, we do House of the Dragon, reviews as well, and also previews for the upcoming episodes. So let's get into it. So I think for the most part, Rings of Power, if you look at critics, if you look at reviews, it's very mediocre to bad. So I, so far, have come out of the show, I wouldn't say even underwhelmed, because I didn't have high expectations to begin with, but I guess that's where I would say. I tried to go in with an open mind, but the episodes have been very meh. And the problem with why they've been so meh is, if you look at House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, they're taking on a very similar concept. They're trying to take a prequel of a major series or event. So you have the Lord of the Rings, you have the War of the Rings, right? And then with House of the Dragon, you have it being kind of a prequel to Game of Thrones, or the War of the Five Kings, whichever you want to go there. And when you do that, you have to think about it. The Dance of the Dragons, the time period House of Dragons is kind of going over, it's going to be like a good 20-year period, right, that they're going to be handling. It's much easier to do that than something like Rings of Power, which is like a 2,000 to 3,000 year period. So when you look about how much they're crunching and how much exposition they're crunching into only 8 episodes in season 1, you're going to come out really underwhelmed. And the other problem with it is, because they have all this information, characters that do not exist within a Silmarillion or even the appendices, when you introduce them, like the Harfoots, right, in Rings of Power, they're an interesting idea, but they don't serve any relevance to the plot. And also, you're wasting time getting through the more boring build-up stuff on other stuff. So we're into episode 3, right? We're going into episode 4 on Thursday night, basically. And we still don't really have a plot. The overarching plot is that Sauron, spoilers again, so if you do not want to have spoilers for Rings of Power, I would click off. Or House of the Dragon. I might get into spoilers with House of the Dragon, but I'm not sure. But the overarching plot, by now, at the end of episode 3, not season 3, episode 3, is that Sauron is kind of massing forces in the east. That's where we've gotten to. We haven't seen Sauron really, unless you think it's a certain character, which I do think it is, but we're not going to go there. The Harfoots, for the most part, are completely irrelevant. They just don't matter to the story right now. Arondir, so this is kind of our elf in the east, he's kind of enslaved by some orcs, and right now that plot's not really going anywhere, really. I think they had a major backstep from the first 2 episodes. And then we have Galadriel's plot, and Galadriel is just such an unlikable protagonist. I think she's probably the most hated character on the show. And the other interesting plot that we have with Elrond and the dwarves kind of just wasn't in episode 3, which was disappointing. So when you look at all these ideas, where House of the Dragon is very focused, it knows where it has to get to. It has a really good plan, I think, of how to get there. It has George R. R. Martin's direct involvement in the show, and he's a very big influence on it. Now, compare that to Rings of Power. Feels very unfocused, feels like they don't know how to get to the plot points they need to get to. They are changing a lot of the lore, completely changing characters completely. They don't have anyone. I mean, they had Peter Jackson. He was willing to help. and have talks with them, and basically the showrunners of Rings of Power basically blocked him or ignored him. So when you look at all these ideas and you go, why is one winning over the other? Well, Rings of Power is a harder concept to bring to to a TV show, right? Also, you have the idea that the showrunners are really not paying close attention to lore, and two, they don't even have the rights to the Silmarillion, which is our major second age source of information. So you have all these ideas where they don't even have the full rights to do the show. It shows that, for me, they're one, isolating a fan base, right? This is something we've seen a lot with Star Wars, with a little bit of Marvel, but not as much because it's not like lore focused, I guess. But we look at something like Star Wars, right? Where the hardcore nerdier fan base, which I would put myself in, is more isolated because they go away from sticking to lore things that we know of, like changing Luke Skywalker, things like that. And they know that's going to piss off those fans. They're trying to appeal to more of the casual fans, but even the casual fans don't like it either. And that's the problem with Rings of Power, is they've isolated a lot of the Lord of the Ring fan base, or the people that really like Tolkien's work. And I'm going to specifically say Tolkien's work, the books, because people that are big fans of that are going to hate this show. This show does not stick anywhere near Tolkien's writing, right? The themes are different. The characters themselves are different. Elrond and Galadriel feel like very different characters. They've done a very bad job of meeting in the middle. So how I will say about meeting in the middle, House of the Dragon, they have changed a lot of things from Fire and Blood. Things that are not major, they haven't changed things that break Fire and Blood, but they've changed things that make more sense to adapting the source material. So, for instance, they've aged up certain characters like Rhaenyra and Alicent at times, and they've done a great job of, I am a hardcore fan, I really like House of the Dragon, while also introducing the casual fans. So I have a friend and his girlfriend. They don't know what's going to happen in House of the Dragon. They haven't read Fire and Blood. They're casual viewers. They watch Game of Thrones. They really like this show. They have done a fantastic job of meeting in the middle, where you get the casual fans that have maybe only watched Game of Thrones or coming in completely blind to the universe as a whole, with the hardcore fan base as well. I think they've done a very good blending of that. Rings of Power has done a horrible job. Rings of Power is really trying to cater to the casual fan base, right? And it's not working, right? The casual fan base doesn't really like the show. I have a friend who's watched Lord of the Rings maybe once when he was younger. So he's going into this completely blind, basically. And he has probably been the most negative on the show, even over me. And I'm someone that has read the Silmarillion. It is literally right there on that shelf. I have read the Lord of the Rings books. I've read The Hobbit. Yeah, it's difficult because they picked a very difficult time to do a show, because you picked the entire Second Age when you could have picked something maybe a little bit more condensed, like maybe the rise of the Witch King and the fall of Arnor, which again still takes over 100 years, but it's a lot more feasible and easier to do. You could have done something a little bit more condensed, like maybe the fall of Moria would have been pretty cool, or the fall of Khazad-dûm, whatever you want to say. But because of those issues, because of the lack of keeping to the books, you can already see the holes in the show. And I'm not saying Rings of Power can't be a good show in the future. It's just, it's taking so long to get to the interesting parts of the Second Age. When we start to really see Sauron rise, it's taking so long to do that, but that I think it's probably lost most of its fan base already. We're never really going to know the true numbers between how well House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power is doing, because they're just not going to tell us. Why would they tell us? It's not really like, if you see a movie, how good it does because we kind of know. Like, they'll actually tell us how well it did. TV shows are vastly different. TV shows are really, you can't really tell. And just gauging off of my community, communities as a whole. So if we're looking at the Men of the West, they are one of my favorite Lord of the Rings YouTube channels. very negative on it, and I get it on YouTube. If you're looking up Lord of the Rings or Rings of Power content, you're probably more of a hardcore fan. But even casual fans I've seen have not liked this show for the most part. It's not doing well. So what I'm getting at is if you're going to do a big fantasy show or even anything with well-established material, you have to be able to mix in the casual fan base with the hardcore fan base and do it well. And that's what House of the Dragon is doing right now. It's doing that really, really well. Because if you look at another aspect of what Rings of Power has done well, but badly at the same time, is that they're introducing a lot of places that we know the hardcore fan base loves to see. Like Moria and all of its splendor, that has been a highlight of Rings of Power. Seeing places like Numenor, Lindon have been really awesome to see. So it's like, it's cool to see these things, and it gets some of the fan base to watch just to see these locations, but the story as of itself is very poor and bad so far, and a lot of the characterizations have been terrible as well. So, yeah. Thank you guys all for watching the video. I just wanted to talk about the two and just kind of have like a mid-season comparison, because we're about halfway through Rings of Power Season 1. We're about halfway through House of the Dragon Season 1, and I think the two are on vastly different paths at the moment. I think House of the Dragon is looking straight up, and I think Rings of Power is very much just kind of at this mediocre line to just dipping down. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about the two shows. Let me know what your guys' thoughts. Do you like both? Do you hate both? Are you liking one? Do you not like the other? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I will see you guys in the House of the Dragon and Rings of Power streams. But, yeah, bye, guys.